Hello, Tara. How's it going today?
Hello, my girl. I'm great. You're glowing and looking
Glowing, you
beautiful
as
per
well. You
usual.
as well. You as well. So, what's been happening?
You know what? I'm just kind of doing my all the things, as my girl Gina always says.
All the
Busy,
things.
busy as usual, but always making time for gratitude and all of my health routines and wellness routines.
Yeah. And speaking of gratitude, we always have to be thankful for things that happen, good and bad. And so I think today's episode is really going to help us reflect on negative things that has happened to us and how we've turned them into positive and used our inner strength to bust through and show our resilience and really kind of take it to the next level. And it really had me thinking a lot about my cancer journey. And, we
Mhm.
just celebrated Breast Cancer Awareness Month and we had some incredible guests on. And while cancer was horrible and I never want to go through that again, it
Mhm.
changed me for the better. And there were so many things that happened during that time that have helped me to kind of look at things in a different light.
Right, right. And you know that I'm the spouse of a survivor, and our listeners have probably heard us talk about this numerous times. And even though it was so scary and awful, there's nothing about it that I would change because what came about afterwards, after we got through it, a stronger relationship, a renewed appreciation for life, a difference in how we live, I wouldn't change it for anything. And I think
Yeah.
we learn about that over and over again. Like, what's it all for if we're not going to take the hard times and the awful things and the fact that we come through it? If we don't take that and turn it into a positive, then it's kind of a waste.
100%. And
Yeah.
we're looking forward to our guest today because she is the epitome of all of this that we're talking about. So, who do we have today?
For sure. We are so excited, listeners. Today on the Welloff Podcast, we have Naseem Rochette. She is the author of The Unexpected Benefits of Being Run Over. She's a mother, she's a sales executive, a coach, a speaker, and we're so happy to have you here with us today. Welcome, Naseem.
Thank
Welcome.
you. So excited to be here.
We're so excited to have you because you are just the right person to be on the Welloff Podcast. We love survivors. We love people that do multiple things and turn those lemons into lemonade. So how about you
Yes.
tell our listeners who you are and a little bit about your journey?
Sure, absolutely. And, I have to start off by saying I love how you guys reinforce the power of reframing and turning, that lemon into lemonade. And I think,
Mhm.
hearing the kind of stories that you share actually helped me navigate when I went through my crazy magical accident. So, for your listeners, let me recap this craziness.
Yes, let's hear all about what happened.
So I laugh. It's funny. It's not funny. But 7 years ago, I was crossing the street. I was in a pedestrian crosswalk when a car turned and hit me, and then stopped. It hit me, and then it accelerated and drove over me, and then it reversed and drove over me a second time, and then it went forward and drove over me a third time, and I was pinned underneath the car.
Oh
Wait,
my
what?
God.
It drove over you 3 times?
Yeah, the
Were
tires
they
went
were
over me
they
5 times.
were they impaired?
They were not impaired. It was 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And I was actually crossing the street to my husband. So he watched all of this.
Oh my
Oh,
goodness.
oh my
How
God.
traumatizing.
It was, yeah, on so many levels, which
Yes.
we'll get into. But, to answer your question, I don't think she was impaired. I think there was a lot of bad judgment, but she's never spoken to us or apologized or so I can only guess as to what was happening. I think when she initially hit me and I was still standing, she'd initially stopped. I think she accelerated to flee the scene is what I believe. And then I think she reversed because there were so many witnesses, people yelling and screaming, and I was also yelling, and so I think she reversed to get back down to the pedestrian crosswalk where she first hit me. And then I think the third time she was probably trying to get off me. And everyone was screaming, like, just stop driving. And finally she stopped, but I was pinned underneath the car.
I'm
My
literally
goodness.
like flabbergasted. My jaw is on the
Me too.
floor.
My mouth is open.
Like what? I
Speechless,
don't.
which is rare.
I yeah. I don't. I'm still. So now, did she get arrested and all these things?
No. So that I talk more about it in the book, all the kind of gory
Okay,
details around that.
we'll
But
get
I
there.
focus
Okay.
on, that nothing really happened to her. She got a ticket for failure to yield to a pedestrian. That was a whole lot of complexity, but I really worked very hard to just focus on what I can control and what I can
Wow.
reframe. And I've even reframed why she reacted the way she reacted. I think it's her defense mechanism, not
I
how I
give
want to
people
live.
like
But
you so much credit because I'm not that kind of person. You wrong me and I'm going to make sure you know that. And I'm going to, I'm just letting you know. Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. So when I hear stories like that, it's inspiring because, the fact that you were able to do this and take this and focus on the good. So tell us how it evolved from there.
yeah, I'll tell you, just digging a little deeper into that. I think some of that is my own, it helps me get through it. So, I often talk about, so when a crazy traumatic accident like that happens, there's so many, so many different dimensions of recovery and journey and trauma. But one of the things I think we all have, beliefs or thoughts or expectations around is how other people are going to show up for us in those moments. And I remember, so many people I didn't expect showed up for me, with so much support and love, that it was almost embarrassing, but I can talk about that later. But then there were some people that didn't show up quite how I expected them to. And, what I realized through my journey is we all go through so many things. Like nobody looks at me right now and says, wow, she was run over 3 times. I can tell by, I can tell by her face, we have no idea what people go through. And so I think sometimes people, maybe they didn't show up for me the way I had thought, or maybe they couldn't deal with it because it triggered something in them. And so I choose to believe that because I also don't want to lose the memories of many good times and other things. I don't want it to be tainted because they struggled, or our relationship struggled during that period. So I think that's, some people have those defense mechanisms, and I'm telling myself that the driver didn't apologize or acknowledge because it was her defense mechanism.
For sure.
That's the kindness to myself.
Yeah. And people's behavior is their own. It has truly nothing to do with us. And we've spoken about this before, like how cancer is scary, death is scary, any kind of traumatic event is scary. And it's that other person's ineptitude, right? That they're not able to show up. It's not about you or an issue with you. But you are beautiful, you're healthy, you're whole. So what did your recovery look like? I mean, what was the extent of your injury because of this happening?
So more craziness. So, as you can imagine, being run over 3 times with the car driving over my head and neck, over my chest, over my legs, being pinned underneath it, was pretty, we all imagined the worst. In fact, when I was under the car, I could feel I could wiggle my fingers and toes, but I couldn't move my body. It was, and I thought my brain had spilled out, my whole
my
face felt
goodness.
raw. Like I thought I was dying. And
Sure.
I thought the injuries were going to be very extensive. We all did. Much to our surprise, I did not break a single bone.
Wow.
I know. And I had no internal, no internal bleeding. I had, many, many issues. My body was raw. I had nerve damage. I had a traumatic brain injury, many, many things, but nothing they needed to admit me into the hospital for. I had to have some eye surgery and stitches all over my body before they released me, but I was never admitted. So I went home, this from like the morning before waking up to this woman who juggled so many different hats, a career, motherhood, a house, to all of a sudden, being released from the hospital, a woman who couldn't open her eyes or
Mm.
walk or move or bear like the touch of my children, or, even my iPhone didn't recognize me. I was nothing like the person that my kids had, seen off to work the day before.
Wow.
Wow. If you're listening, Tara, my faces are just
Yeah,
like
me too. I'm
total
just,
WTF. Like,
Yeah.
just
it's so
holy
shocking.
cow.
So shocking.
Well, and what was really crazy about it is, at first it was hard to even believe. I was like, well, if they didn't admit me to the hospital, was it really so bad? And I actually told my boss, I was working at Microsoft at the time, that this happened on a Monday. I was like, I'll be back to work on Thursday. Clearly I wasn't. I
Oh
didn't
my
work for a couple
goodness.
months. But, it was hard for me to accept that if I wasn't in the hospital, why couldn't I just shake it off? If I
Hmm.
didn't break any bones, what was really wrong with me? But but there were so many things wrong with me, but I didn't know how to articulate what they were. All I felt was embarrassed. All these people wanted to help me, and they wanted to do things and drive my kids and buy dinners and support me. And I was the one who juggled it all and helped other people. And
Hmm.
it was so hard for me to even, communicate or function in this world where I all of a sudden felt like, the victim or the needy one. But luckily, a couple of things happened.
Yes.
It's actually a very common thing for people who are doers, that are type A, overachievers, multitaskers, whatever you want to call them, to be in the position to receive, right? Because there's a lot of doing and a lot of giving. So when life kind of upends you and you're in that position, and Gina knows this too, it can be really hard to be the one now to benefit from others' generosity.
Yeah, actually, each act of kindness in the beginning felt like a debt in my ledger. I was saying to the
Wow.
kids, write down who sent the flowers. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to send thank you notes, and I
Yeah.
just looked at it all as work, all that kindness. There are a couple things actually that luckily happened, or maybe not so lucky, but a couple things happened that helped me reframe how to deal with a lot of that kindness, which is one of the things that I feel so lucky about. So after the accident, even though I didn't want people to help me, my doctors and my husband convinced me to see a trauma therapist. And the trauma therapist taught me about the art of kintsugi, where you take a broken piece of pottery and you put it back together with a gold inlay. And I loved that because I really latched onto it, because I thought, okay, I don't have to be a victim. This is now my journey. And I used to have scars all over my face. I actually used to put gold glitter on my scars too. I thought,
Oh.
this is my journey. I'm going to talk about
Love it.
it, and I'm not going to hide it. But the other thing that happened, and this was not so good, but it was enlightening. My brother, who I'm very, very close to, lost his dog, and he
Hmm.
loved his dog so much. And I love my brother so much. And so when he was hurting, I wanted to help him. And this is like, a few days after I've been run over 3 times. And he's like, sister, you just got run over. Don't worry about me. Take care of
Yeah.
yourself. And I just kept thinking, well, you've got to be feeling bummed and sad and, heartbroken, and there must be something I can do. And that helped me realize that just like I needed to help him, people needed to help me. I
Hmm.
had been run over. My kids lost the mom they had known. My friends lost, their person. My colleagues, like the community, so many people could see themselves in just this random act of walking across the street in a pedestrian crosswalk and being hit. And they all wanted to actively participate in the healing. And so between the kintsugi and starting to speak about my journey, not as a victim, but as part of my journey, and realizing people needed to help me, I started to share all the vulnerabilities and things that I was going through. And what I realized, and I think it's so instrumental for women like us that are so used to wearing so many hats and juggling so much, is that sometimes accepting help and showing weakness is actually a dimension of strength, because it's not necessarily for us. Sometimes it's about helping someone else by letting them help us.
For sure. For sure.
Yeah.
So at what point did you decide that you were going to turn this around and take this experience and turn it into a positive?
So I, when the accident happened, I was 47 years old, and I was, as a young girl, I was very shy, very insecure. By the time I reached, the day of the accident, I had worked so hard to become a person that I liked and to build a life that I was proud of. And by that day, I had 3 kids that I really like, and that I loved. I had a great job and a wonderful husband and a life that I had worked so hard to build. And it was a happy story. We would dance around the kitchen and sing and, enjoy great vacations. And I didn't want to just let all that go because I was run over. And I'm not going to say it was easy. But I knew that there was something that I wanted to get back to. However, I think it was only because I had also heard all of these other stories of people surviving terrible things that I knew it was also possible. And, it wasn't easy. I mean, that year, even now, like we don't dance around the house anymore because I can't have music on in more than two rooms. I have a traumatic brain injury. But, we've gotten back to that happy life because we decided it was going to be a happy story. And, I think we decided that, within the first 3 to 6 months, maybe, but we really didn't, we really weren't kind of happy and embracing it, probably until close to the first anniversary when we decided, to call it a holiday, to call it Unbreakable Day, have a party and just celebrate that I lived, and not look at that as the day I almost died, but I call it like the day I like basically became a superhero because I survived being run over
Yeah.
3 times.
So what was
Seriously, that's incredible.
Yeah. What was going on during this first year of recovery? So you're saying like people lost their mom that they knew, they lost their friend that they knew. Like what exactly shifted? What changed? What weren't you able to do?
So, I was a master juggler and problem solver. That's what I did, by, just the way I lived with my family.
I was really thinking you were a juggler. I was like, can you show us? Okay, I got it. Continue.
I can't do it. I can't even like
I'm like, oh, she could juggle? What were you juggling? Like knives and stuff?
Master of chaos.
Moving on.
Yes, master of chaos. And I'm in technology sales, and my job is to solve very complex technology problems for my clients.
Mm-hmm.
And my brain was so out of whack that one day, a few weeks after the accident happened, my husband asked me to fill out a camp form for my, then 7-year-old. It's a camp form, like name, address, tell me a little bit about your child. I laid in bed and cried for hours because my brain couldn't even, it didn't know where to take the first step to fill out a form like that. My brain didn't work. It didn't work for a long time. And like, even, listening to a voicemail, I didn't listen to voicemails for months. The idea of somebody leaving me a message and giving me a task, like calling them back, was terrifying. And it sounds so silly, I know, but my brain just didn't work. It's like all of my energy, my mental energy was just in trying to recover.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was the, that was the mental, there was the physical, like I couldn't walk. I couldn't even hold a cup of coffee. I couldn't zip a sweatshirt. I couldn't even
My
bear my kids
goodness.
to hug me because my body was raw. I had cuts all over my face. I didn't go out in the sun for a couple of years. So just sometimes like small changes, but that were impactful. Like, not being able to go outside, not being able to sit, crisscross the applesauce on the floor with my little kids. That was really hard, and I
Sure.
Yeah.
even now, like I feel so excited when I do that. And I remember there was a year I didn't do that. I often tell the story of, if I said to you that I showered today, I don't think anyone would be impressed. I think you would expect that I showered today. But if you knew that I couldn't climb the stairs or couldn't bear water on my body, or couldn't, lift my arm, if you didn't know those things, you wouldn't realize what a big deal the shower was. So one of the actual gifts and insights I gained too was that when you let people know where you know about your journey, like your cracks, then you get to celebrate all the victories. Like I got to text my girlfriends and say, I showered today. Like, woohoo, like
Yeah.
you get to celebrate those little things, which actually become really big things.
For sure. I don't know what is frustrating me the most, that the driver of this vehicle had zero consequences, or that the hospital didn't admit you. I mean, it seems like
I'm pissed about all of it.
unfathomable. Yeah, right?
I'm legit pissed. Like that. Where's that
Yeah.
girl? I'm gonna call her.
Yeah, that's awful, awful. So, what did your rehabilitation look like? I mean, were you in intensive therapies? Did you not work for a very long time?
Yeah, so I did take I did have to get physical therapy actually in my house because I couldn't even move enough to leave the house. So for a couple of months I had a, physical therapist come to the house several times a week. And I remember when I finally did go to doctor's appointments, even that just was such a tough ordeal because it was always this constant reminder that I wasn't me. And there was actually a point where I stopped going to the doctor. Not that I recommend this, but one day I just sat in the doctor's office and I just said, I can't do it for a minute. I need a break. I need to just pretend that I'm okay. And for me, that was part of my reframing. And that was also the time I decided, against my doctor's wishes, to go back to work because I thought that it would make me feel like me again. It was a good and a very, very bad decision. It was good because
I'm sure
it's like, life might be normal again. But very bad because I didn't actually have the mental capacity or the physical capacity to go back to work. I would need to take a nap during the day. I couldn't walk across the street without, panic attacks, like all, all these little things that turn into very big things.
So how did you shift? So you went back to work, and then when did you shift to, I'm going to write a book, I'm going to start speaking about this? When did that happen? How soon after?
So it didn't happen for a while, at least the book part of it. The sharing was something I decided in that first year where I decided to reframe and make it a happy story. I wanted to somehow kind of pay it forward. I know I'm lucky that I survived that. And I wanted to share the insights in case somebody else, one day goes through something hard. So I would send an email to, the people in my life. I'm not, not a big, or wasn't a big social sharer, and say, okay, these are some of the insights I gained from being under the car during my recovery. And that was it. I was like, that was my paying it forward. When COVID happened and we were locked down, kind of felt like, we're all living in this unbreakable day. And some of the things that I learned might be of broader value. So I actually just wrote out my 10 lessons, what I call the sermon part of my book. And really, if I could have just said, hey, here are my 10 lessons, done, I would have, because I really was not planning to share all the details of my life.
Yeah.
But I realized without knowing the journey, first from going from a very insecure girl to finding a life and building a life that I like, to all of the things I learned in the second journey after being run over, the sermon wouldn't hold as much value and weight. And so it was during COVID that I started writing the book. And I think I probably wrote like 60% of it in a few weeks. But then just the refinement and the 20 other drafts took another 2 years or so, because I wanted to be very careful. We're all so busy. Like, I didn't want to write too many gratuitous details. Like, none of us have time for all that extra. At least, I don't want to.
Thank you for sparing us on that. I'm very squeamish, very squeamish. Not Tara, though. She was a nurse.
No, I'm not squeamish at all. But I am dying to ask you a question, because trauma is my clinical specialty. And I just can't stop thinking about your husband watching this entire accident unfold and what that must have been like for him.
He is by nature a very laid back guy.
Mm-hmm.
The kind of guy like, take a policy, so laid back. But it really shook him. And as you can imagine, he thought he was sure that I died, and he had to deliver that news to my kids. Aww. And to my parents. And I think that 90 minutes, not just the moment of watching me under the car, which in itself was horrific, but having to tell my family what happened was maybe just as hard, if not harder. And then, in the weeks that followed, he actually probably put aside a lot of his trauma to focus on me. He did, I tried to get him to see my trauma therapist, but he just focused on me. But something really amazing also happened, is that I had gone from being the one that runs the household and does everything and says, honey, why didn't you do this? And I told you to do that. And, getting mad at him for not doing the things I wanted him to do. He would just do them. And I realized I hadn't given him the chance to do those things before, because I wanted it done the way I wanted it done on my timeline. And I realized how unfair I had been to him in so much of our marriage. So it actually really strengthened our marriage in many ways. And the trauma part of it, I think, he's never really fully dealt with it, because he's just focused on me.
And I notice, you're able to talk about this so calmly and even with humor now, right? And as soon as we started talking about him, you got emotional. So, yeah.
It was hard on my kids too.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Actually, I'll share with you guys, I did something called a breathwork session recently. And it actually took me back to the day of the accident, being under the car. And I remember I started to cry and apologize to my kids and to my husband, actually, because of the trauma I had caused them, which I guess is something that, really still, as you astutely saw, is one of the really hard things, is knowing how much it hurt them.
Sure. Well, I mean, you truly are an inspiration, and it's amazing to see you physically and also to hear about how you've turned this into such a positive for so many people. So, I mean, as someone who has been through so much and who does so much, what are you doing nowadays to keep yourself grounded and healthy and positive?
I think, as you guys know, we have to be so intentional with that. And I try to be very mindful of the insights and the lessons that I learned during the journey. I have some tattoos, which you can't really see, but to remind me of some of the things I learned. I often say I'm not enlightened. Like, I had this journey and I learned a lot, but I still need to remind myself, and to like keep myself grounded and keep myself, kind of forward thinking and embracing the positive value of this trauma. I just live certain daily habits, like appreciating the people around me, because it's one of the things. When I was under the car, I realized my kids knew how much I loved them, but maybe all my friends and other people in my life didn't. So I'm extra intentional about saying, thank you and I appreciate you, and what you did made an impact. Whether it's to a stranger in line that holds a door open, or my community of friends, taking that moment to be present and appreciate. I think I try to, be extra thoughtful in, if I do something wrong, saying sorry, because that, I didn't get that courtesy, and that really, really hurt.
Pisses
You know,
me off.
I know. I think,
So bad.
I know it's
Yeah.
so bad. I try to reach out to people that are going through tough things and be mindful that I don't ask them questions. Like, one of the hard things for me was when someone said, "How are you?" And I didn't know how to answer that, because I
How
knew
do
they
you
were
think I am?
but like, I didn't want to say I'm fine. I didn't want to say I'm terrible. I didn't want to be a downer, but I didn't want to lie and say it's okay. So, I always try to just say, thinking about you, here if you need anything, and not ask a question, but just give a statement of support.
I love that.
So I try to practice some of those little things.
Well, and a good way to tackle that is when you know someone's been through something or they're going through something, it's like a no-brainer that they're not well. So adding on today at the end of the question is helpful. Like, how are you today? Because the healing journey is nonlinear, grief is nonlinear. So there's good days and bad days. So it's how that person feels in the moment.
Yeah, you were spot on. That's a great insight. Another thing that I try to always remind myself of is, is what you guys talk so much about, is the reframing, the words that I'm choosing. Like, when I talk about the accident, it's unbreakable day. It's the day I lived. It's not the day I died. When I talk about, and some of this is about being kind to myself again. When I talk about, myself now, I focus on, I can go deeper on a problem. I don't focus on, I can't juggle 20 things anymore. I have to be kind to myself and reframe even the things that I can and can't do, or things that have changed, in a positive way.
Yeah.
You talked about your little tattoos that are reminders. And I have my favorite mantra tattooed on me, and it is bless them, change me. And when someone offends you, or if you feel just affronted in some way by something someone's done or not done, you can't change them, but you send them blessings, and you can only change yourself. And that's what you've done.
You guys are really much better people than I am. I'm sorry. But just segueing a little bit to on your website, you have something that's really kind of struck a nerve with me, is a good nerve. But by harnessing your inner strengths and passion, you can conquer any challenge, and realizing your dreams by embracing your unique story. And that, like, finding the unbreakable you. And I love that. And so that's what you do in your coaching business now. That's how you help people. To tell me about that.
Yeah. I think so often we take the tough moments and we just, put them in the closet, don't talk about them. We're like, oh, that was tough. But there's so much we learn in those moments. And, I don't think we often take the time to recognize the strength it took to navigate through. It doesn't mean the tough moments weren't tough, or the tragedies weren't, tragic, but we can still have learned something. We can still appreciate the people around us that helped us navigate those tough moments. And I think when we start to, look at how did we grow and find that inventory of insights and, you know, almost success in a way that, you know, those moments helped lay the foundation for. You know, we are really reframing and giving ourselves so much more um, courage to navigate the next things and to you know empathize with others that are going through things, because I think if we don't think about what we've gone through, we also forget what we've learned.
So
I
true.
am dying to ask you another question,
Ask
which
away.
is what we ask all of our which we ask all of our podcast guests is, what does well-off mean to you?
You know, well off. I'm a joy seeker, so well off means that I'm in a that I'm smiling, that I'm living in service to the people around me, and that can be, you know, my kids, my cats, my colleagues, you know, that we're collaborating, that we're lifting each other. I love there's a phrase, you know, you rise by lifting others.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
that's joy to me. That's well off. You know, if I can have the freedom to, you know, maybe wear fabulous jewelry, great shoes, and my favorite jeans, and help people. I am so
And some
Now
some
we're
great
talking,
shoes.
Naseem.
Yes.
I need that whole picture, if I'm honest. But
Yes. But we want all the things, you know, what, even if it is some materialistic things, you know, well off is different to everyone.
For sure, for sure. Well, a beautiful answer from a beautiful soul.
Yes.
thank
And
you.
thank you so much for sharing your story. I know you have been speaking about this a lot, but it's still, I mean, we can tell just by watching your face when you tell it that every time you talk about it, and I'm sure when you listen back to yourself talking about it, I know for me, that's the same thing. When I hear myself talking about cancer, it really brings up a lot of emotion. So it takes a lot of courage to take this experience and speak on it to help others. So we commend you for that. That's amazing.
Sure. And Naseem, how can our listeners find you and find your book and acquire your services if they need them?
So if they want to find me and for coaching or speaking, you can go to naseemrochette.com or lifeunbreakable.com, whatever you remember.
Okay.
And if you want the book or to listen to the story, you can get the book, the Kindle, the Audible, which is me narrating, on Amazon or really wherever books are sold.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for being here today and sharing your story and your light.
No, thank you
Yes.
guys.
Thank you.